Hello, everybody. This is Becky from Alpha Moose. I am the owner and lead writer, and I am also a professional development and job development expert. Today, we'll be going over the resume writing pro tips that'll help you stand out in a crowd. Of course, the goal is to make sure that your resume is selected and that you get a chance to progress farther into the process, doing interviews, talking to the hiring managers, and ultimately landing that job. So today we'll go over, like I said, some pro tips. I'll also show some actual examples so you can see what that might look like. So let's get started. So my name is Becky, like I said. I have been working in the job development, resume writing, and professional development world for quite some time now. I personally believe that every single person has incredible potential. Some people just don't know how to make that shine on their resume. So my job is to help them really develop an amazing resume and cover letter and even LinkedIn profile that can convey all of the best assets they have. So I have about 10 years of experience building resumes from the ground up, helping people who are re-entering the workforce convey their expertise, finding creative ways to show that they have been busy, they have been doing things. I also have about 7 years experience elevating resumes. So resumes that already exist and might be okay, but my job is to make them stand out, look amazing and compelling, and really get that hiring manager's attention. I also have about 3 years in direct services with job development. So that means lead research, interview skills coaching, application support, and career strategy. So let's dive right into what resumes do, okay? What's the point? What are you doing with a resume? You are succinctly and clearly presenting the best assets of the applicant in usually a single page document. And that can be hard to do sometimes. There's a lot of different things that we bring to the party, and you might not always be able to convey them just in one page, but the goal is to do as good as you can. Make sure that as many of your strengths are highlighted there and that any weaknesses or obstacles are addressed effectively. A couple things to note: there are a lot of formats and designs to choose from. There is no one format or design that's better than the others. There are some very simple ones that I'll show you later on that you can kind of stick with. And then there are some creative ones, there are some other ones that you can choose from, but there's no right or wrong way to design or lay out a resume. So I'm not going to go into detail today on the specific sections because that's very dependent on your experience and your background. But I'll show you some examples of good ones and bad ones so you can kind of avoid the pitfalls. It's also not quite the same thing as a CV or an application. Among college students or international students, a curriculum vitae or a CV is more common than a resume. That's usually longer, it goes into more detail, and that's a little bit different than a traditional resume here in the US. Of course, an application is also different. It's going to have more details, more reference information, job information, including like addresses and phone numbers. It gets very detailed. And of course, those can depend on the situation. You may need one or both of those as well in order to apply to a job. But this training today is just talking about resumes. And if you follow the tips in this presentation, you will be ahead of most applicants. Part of my experience that I went over was actually being a hiring manager as well. So that means that I know what to look for. I know how many candidates are out there for both entry-level and higher-level jobs. And I've seen the resumes, and I know, at least in my region, what that typically looks like. And I know that if you are able to follow these tips in this presentation, you'll be, head and shoulders above a lot of other people that are applying for jobs right now. But it is important to note that not every single tip is applicable for every single person. There might be one that you want to adjust or just kind of finagle a little bit for your particular situation. Now, I will also talk about highlighting your strengths and rewriting things to put it in a better light and things like that. But I am never, ever, ever advocating for lying. You should never be outright saying something, you did something, or that you had a job that you just didn't have. So you might get there might be some gray area there in terms of you're not sure, but always err on the side of being completely honest. That doesn't mean you can't portray it in a positive way, but you should never lie on your resume. So let's dive right in. There are 6 resume pro tips I'm going to share with you today. Here are the first 3. Fill one page, format consistently, and list your experience correctly. So let's start with number 1. Unless you've been in the same industry for a long time, or you are the CEO of Fortune 500, aka you have a very high level role, you should be sticking to one page. If you are in that exception where you have been working in your same industry for quite a while and you're high level, then of course maybe 2 pages would be better to better express and go into detail on your specific skills and things that you've acquired over your career. However, that said, most of us are going to fall in that single page range. So you might think, well, where do I put the references or where do I put the other things? Creative formatting can help you reduce or expand your content to fit that one page nicely. And another note, I said fill one page, not just keep it to one page. So you shouldn't have just a couple lines at the top of a piece of paper and call it done. It should look robust in that single page. And I'll show you examples in just a moment. Format consistently. So this means that if you have bold headers, they should be bold throughout. If you have size 12-point font for your text, it should be that way throughout. If you have certain formatting for different areas, you should keep it consistent. And the reason for this is that the human brain, specifically the human eye, is drawn to consistent things. And when there's a pattern, it makes us instantly be able to find what we need and absorb that information very quickly. So that hiring manager who's only looking at your resume for 6 to 7 seconds is going to need to have that clean, nice formatting that lets them find exactly what they need as quickly as possible. This also applies and falls a little bit into grammatical consistency. So using the past tense for previous positions mean that they can scan it, they can see, okay, they did this, they did this, they did this, and they'll have that automatically in their head as past tense. If they have it present tense in different places, that'll make them go back and check the dates, see like, oh, are they still there? It creates obstacles to them fully absorbing your resume in that just a few second time frame. Number 3, list your experience. Now this is a given that you should list your experience, right? But you should do it correctly. So only go back about 10 years. There are some exceptions to this, like let's say you are in that high-ranking position and you need to kind of expand a little bit more in your skills. And always list in reverse chronological order. So the most recent goes at the top. When appropriate, you can also use volunteer or stipend work, self-employment, contract work, and other kinds of non-traditional employment. But you should never include anything that's under 2 months. Now, like I said, there's exceptions to everything, and in some cases, like if you're a recent grad, or like you have that longer-term career experience, you may want to bend these rules a little bit. But the important thing is to show consistent employment or consistent activity in the past 10 years at least, and hopefully, consistent activity that relates back to that desired job role that you're applying for. Next, we have 4, 5, and 6. Stay positive, stand out, and don't get extra. I'll tell you what I mean. For stay positive, this is where you can address any potential red flags or any kinds of obstacles that the hiring manager may look at and go, maybe not this person. What we want to do is we don't want to lie, but we do want to, if possible, ease any fears they may have right off the get-go. So what that might mean is maybe there's a big gap in your employment, but what if you were a mom during that time, or maybe you were volunteering at that time, or doing other things that might not be a traditional kind of work experience. So all you have to do is if you are doing activities during that gap, put those on your resume. Make it clear that it was a volunteer or other kind of situation, but include that too. Don't just leave a big gap. You can also explain things in your objective, or if you have the opportunity, you can include that in your cover letter. So of course, exactly what this might look like for your resume will vary depending on what the situation is, but you do want to try and be upfront about any obstacles and then quickly and effectively resolve them in the same breath. That way, the hiring manager doesn't feel misled and they feel confident that they can move forward with you. Number 5, stand out. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to make your resume look fabulous. Many of the tips here talk about that and include those kinds of direction, but you don't just want to look good. You want to look good for your industry and the role you're going for. So research it, Google it, look up what other resumes look like that are applying for the same role that you are looking for. Look up industry keywords and resume keywords that algorithms might be picking up on when they go through applications. Figure those out, make sure that those keywords are included on your resume when applicable, and make sure that your resume is looking pretty good compared to those other resumes. If you look at that other group of people and you realize that you're missing things, that tells you what you need to do to improve. Number 6, the final big tip, don't get extra. So in the effort that some people have to get to this point where they've improved their resume and looking great and they really want to stand out, they might do a little too much. And that means they might be putting in big words or jargon that doesn't make sense or isn't necessary for what they're talking about. They also might use full sentences or repeat themselves in job descriptions. So the point is we want to make it succinct and clear. That doesn't mean that we can't use some big words here and there or use jargon when it's appropriate for the role. But we don't want to just use them willy-nilly, and you should avoid using I in your sentences. Delete any extra spaces. You don't need your references on your resume. And then, of course, don't include sections that don't apply to your situation. An example might be, let's say you got a degree 15 years ago in a field that has nothing at all to do with what you were applying for, and you already have a lot of great experience that speaks to that over the past 15 years. In that case, I wouldn't even include that education. Now, let's say you're a recent grad, even if it's not in the field you're going for, I would definitely include that education information because that would tell them that you have been busy over the past 4 or 6 years or whatever it may be. So again, depends on your situation, but try not to go overboard with style, formatting, words, and things that don't apply to your situation. So let's look at some examples. I'm going to show you 3 different examples. These are common ones that I've come across that could be improved very, very easily. Of course, like I said, there's a million different scenarios, formats, styles, job descriptions, backgrounds. So this can't cover all of it. And I will share my contact information at the end so that you can reach out if you have any further questions. But let's look at this one, the Rambler. So this is the one I see a lot. People have very long resumes, 3, 4, I even got one that was 6 pages long. And very often it's not 6 pages of quality content. It's pages and pages of things that are repeat or extra spacing or just information I don't need. So in this case, it's a 3-pager. You can see on that 3rd page, there's a lot of empty space there, right? A lot of room for improved formatting here. What we can do is it's not a terrible format to begin with because you can clearly see the information laid out. However, it doesn't look very modern or sophisticated, and it does use a lot of space that could be condensed a little bit to make that a cleaner single page, maybe 2-page resume if that person's background warrants. So for example, that 3rd page is mostly references, and I told you no references, so we can get rid of those. We can also tighten up that top header a little bit, and then like I said, other kinds of formatting or templates could help us really tighten up that information a little bit more. It's hard to see in this example because they are very small pictures, but the wording is also not great. It can definitely be improved. There's some inconsistencies in terms of tense and repeat job duties. So what you'd like to show over time, even if you are in a similar role multiple times, you want to show progression and growth. So in your oldest role, maybe that's the one where you kind of talk about more of the entry-level duties and the basic stuff. And then the next role, focus on the things you did that were different. You can still include like a summary of those entry-level, but you don't want to be repeating yourself over and over again. So your most recent role in the same field should talk a lot about maybe the leadership roles you've had, managerial expertise, or different things that are really higher level than the other ones you've done. Obviously, this is not going to apply to every situation. You may have different jobs in different fields, but if this is a multiple jobs in the same field growth kind of situation, you don't want to be repeating yourself on every job description. And then, of course, every job that you've already had in the past that has ended, you use past tense. The current job that you have, you would use present tense. And then, as I mentioned, the consistency here is okay. It lets the eye find what it needs pretty quickly, but the style can definitely improve, right? All right, let's look at our next example. The beginner. So I've seen many of these as well. Maybe recent grads, maybe someone who's never had to work before. They throw some info on a piece of paper and they don't know what else to do. They don't know what the next steps are to make this look really good. So this is the similar problem to the other one. There's a lot of empty space here. And yeah, sure, it's at 1 page, but it's a very empty 1 page, and we want to fill it up a little bit more, make it look a little more robust. So using a better template that kind of creates some spacing, but like strategic spacing, is useful. And then we can also expand on some experiences and skills. In this case, I put this person as having recently graduated, but there's no mention of any of the classes they took. If they're looking for a job in the same field they just graduated from, there's many classes they took, certifications, training, all of that could be really good on this resume. And even if you didn't do a recent graduation, there's more information that could go on here, certainly. Volunteer experience, organizations and affiliations, certifications, all of those kinds of things. So we can add more here. That said, if you look at the top, we don't need the full address on a resume anymore. Hiring managers are not sending us letters. So all we really need to include is maybe the city, state, and zip so they get an idea of where we're located. But especially if it's a remote position or you don't feel comfortable including that, you might not even need that. What's very important though is your email address and phone number. Make sure those are there and they're updated. And then as I mentioned, grammar also matters. Lists of incomplete phrases, like the skills list here, don't need periods because it's just a fragment or a phrase. So you would get rid of periods here. Fun grammar note, if it is a list of full sentences, then you would use a period. But in this case, we don't need them. As I've already mentioned, we never use I on a resume. So in this case, you can see under some of the experience, they put I a lot in there. So we'd want to get rid of that. All you have to do is literally just delete that I, and you can have things like help shelve books, answer questions and phones, and that would be a good style formatting. Then remember to use past tense for previous positions. Like I said, if you look under the second experience, Donna's Diner, this person used present tense. So we would not want to do that. We would want to make sure that it's past tense so that the hiring manager doesn't get confused about which role this was, or when it took place, or if it's still happening. Third example, and this will be our final example of bad resumes, and then we'll start looking at some good ones so you can see some great examples. This is the informer. So much information, right? And no space to breathe. It is really hard for my eye to find what I need to find in the work experience. It's like a big block of text. Sure, I can kind of see the summary, I can kind of see publications and skills, but it's a lot of information to go through, and it creates mental fatigue for the hiring managers who have to look at these every day. So this is not what you want. So first off, you can definitely reduce some of the text here for each of the descriptions. And I know, again, it's hard to see. There's a lot of duplication in the job duties. So that could be condensed quite a bit. Just a little bit of editing to remove the stuff that's been repeated. That alone will create some spacing between the job descriptions, the job duties. Then you're going to use a little bit of formatting, like bolding the company names and positions so that you can see which sections are which. You can have that separation. Now this format, or this template, isn't bad. It's a very straightforward, nice one. It could be, you could keep this template, but you do want to increase the style, upgrade the style a little bit. And the way you can do that is definitely don't use Times New Roman. It's a nice font, it's a classic, but it's not the most modern, and it's not the most engaging and appealing, visually appealing font that you could use. So play around with it, look at some other fonts out there, try and find one that's still easy to read, but is more modern. You also want to increase that header size, and then maybe possibly a highlight color. You can see they may already have started to work with that. Those two lines near the top are a little blue, so maybe they could do a dark blue for their headings, like professional, summary, contact, publication skills, something like that. That'll make it stand out a little bit more. And this is something that I'll go over with our good examples in just a moment. All right, here are two examples of decent resumes. Now, like I said, there are a lot of formats, styles, and everybody's work experience is different. So what sections you'll include, what style you'll have is completely up to you. On the left, you'll see it's a very basic layout. This is kind of a classic layout. I've seen a lot of these. There's nothing wrong with this at all, as long as it's nicely formatted, consistent. It has really nicely written, quick to understand, easy to understand job duties, and it's clear. So you can see that it's all laid out very nicely. The headings are the same size. The text is the same size. Everything's aligned properly on the left. We have the dates easily visible. We have a nice little quick executive summary that doesn't go on and on. We have an address and a phone number and a LinkedIn profile link up there at the top. Now, I did mention that you don't need the full address, so I would agree with that still here. You don't need the full address, but in this case, they chose to include it. That's fine. And everything here is very clean. That's the important part. It looks clean, it looks full, and it looks it's easy to read. On the right, we get a little more stylistic. We've got some blue going on there. And then we also have certifications and achievements more front and center than just the experience. So this is a good option if you don't have as much experience, or you want to really highlight more of the side work you've done to achieve these certifications and different ratings and stuff. Getting a little bit more stylistic, we have two other options here. The one on the left is a nice, simple style, but it is a little different, right? It's a little more modern. It kind of grabs your eye a little bit more. So it's one nice one to use. Is again very clean. The contact profile skills very easy to find. Experience is very easy to find and easy to read each of the details, and everything is consistent. So all the headers are the same fonts, italics, size, everything, right? Same on the right-hand side. We've got that consistent formatting. This one has a little watermark background and some visuals on it. Many resumes also include the option to have a headshot, and that's also optional. And you've got all the information you clearly need in visible, very clearly visible and easy to find. Your contact info, you've got those certifications, training, and organizations front and center. A lot of good stuff here. Now, one more note. The 4 examples I just showed you were all the standard traditional resume format. There are other formats that can provide a different way of presenting your information. So let's say you have worked at the same job or same company for 30 years, but of course you've had different roles at that company and gained different expertise. So in that case, you might want more of a functional resume, which focuses more on the job duties and skills you've acquired rather than the actual experience. So you'll still include it, but it's kind of like including it over here on the left with skills or education, and then you're swapping places. The skills would be the main part that goes more in depth on the kinds of things you can do and what you have accomplished in your career. You can Google that, Google functional resume, see if that might work better for you. But like I said, there's a lot of different options out there, and everyone's different. All right. Final notes. So we've gone over the main tips. We've looked at some bad examples and some good examples. This is just the last little, you cross your T's, dot your I's before you hit submit. Check for spelling and grammar. Use Microsoft Word's spelling and grammar tool. You can use Grammarly.com. That's a free resource, or you can get it professionally reviewed. But make sure that you really look it over a couple times before you submit your resume. Another fun fact is that if you are updating your style or formatting, it might look fantastic, but then if you save it as a PDF, something might go awry. Same thing with printing. You might print it and realize some of the text is spilling onto the second page. So do that. Save as a PDF and print it so that you can see what it actually looks like and what that manager will see at the end. Make sure your contact info is accurate. It's not very helpful if your resume is fantastic, but they have no way of contacting you. So make sure that's correct and that you are receiving calls or receiving emails. They're not going into spam. And then as another little pro tip, read it out loud. Have a friend look it over to catch mistakes. Sometimes we look at things over and over again and it all looks good, and then we immediately send it, and immediately afterwards we see that there's 3 typos that we could have caught. Reading out loud or having some other set of eyes look it over can be very helpful. So try those things out. And like I said, following the tips just in this little presentation will put you head and shoulders above the competition. And then of course, if you can research your industry, if you know the person you're applying to, all of those things can also help give you a leg up. So the last tip, good luck. I really wish the best for you. I love helping people find their jobs, their perfect jobs. And if you do ever need more resources, you want to contact me, or you want a professional resume development, please reach out to me at alphamoosewriting.com. Good luck.